Creator God, source of all being, we place ourselves in your holy presence. We ask you to open our hearts and minds to each other and to what you are saying to each of us through this presentation today. Help us to embrace and further the synodal process by speaking and truly listening with honesty and humility and great love. May it bring hope and healing to our wounded church. We continue to pray for the victims and survivors of sexual abuse. May all who have been abused in any way by your church ministers be respected and receive real justice and authentic reparation. May we be beacons of Christ's healing light and compassion to them, to their families, and to all the world. Amen.
Amen.
Our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that many of the lands we live, work, and meet on are the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples across this country. As settlers, it is our responsibility to learn about and acknowledge our colonial history and the ways in which we may continue to perpetuate it. As people of faith working for justice, we are called to discern how we are to respond to the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and how we can support Indigenous peoples across this land we know as Canada. We stand in solidarity with all victims of clergy sexual abuse. We are moved by compassion to reflect deeply on the suffering of our wounded brothers and sisters and to pray for them always. We make a commitment to educate ourselves and others about the devastating impact of this scandal in our church. We promise to promote justice and healing for victims and their families and for all those injured by this betrayal of our deepest values. We commit ourselves to the transformation of church structures and clerical culture that put protecting the institution above justice for victims and accountability for offenders. We rely on God in all of this, asking that we be sustained in this commitment we have made.
So I'm very privileged to be able to introduce our panel. We're going to start with Val Borelli. Val is an alcoholic and a survivor of childhood clergy sexual abuse. He's a proud auto worker and father of 3 dynamic daughters. Erica, a doctoral student, newly engaged. Savannah, newly graduated from criminology. And Sophia, apprentice in industrial mechanics. Almost 2 years ago, Val married Sonia, the most amazingly daring woman he knows. Val says this, he is a reformed asshole and he just wants to help in any way that he can. So no more children are abused, and so that those who were abused can find healing. His passion is to create beautiful food and a magical garden. Brenda Coleman is a cradle Catholic, recently widowed with 2 adult daughters and 2 grandchildren, both in university. A retired registered nurse, Brenda is a founding member and the driving force behind CLC Niagara. She is actively involved in the implementation phase of the final document of the Synod on Synodality in the Diocese of St. Catharines. Bob McCabe is a recovered alcoholic and a survivor of clerical sexual abuse who lost his job, his wife, his family, his financial resources, his friends, his self-respect, and his dignity. His successful, long, and painful journey back to health, serenity, and stability is inspirational. He is a passionate believer in the power of the recovery process and the human spirit, as evidenced in his own experience and the organization he founded, Recovery Speaking Initiative. Kathy Peed was born in Glasgow, Scotland, into an Irish Catholic family, and has lived most of her adult life in Hamilton, Ontario. Kathy has always found great comfort and consolation in her faith, and the fact that others have found wounding and pain in that same place is deeply troubling to her. As the extent and the depth of the clergy sexual abuse scandal became clearer, she felt moved to respond as a lay Catholic, believing that healing in community is still possible. Father Peter Rowe, after his earliest years in his hometown of Oshawa, Father Peter received higher education at the University of Toronto and St. Augustine Seminary, culminating in his ordination as a priest in 1979. In the 45 plus years of priesthood since, he has served as a pastor of 5 parishes in the Diocese of St. Catharines, including terms as dean. He was involved in the Search Weekends for Youth and for over 20 years served as a diocesan spiritual guide for the Holy Name Society. In recent years, he's undertaken numerous European pilgrimages as well as to the Holy Land. He considers those pilgrims to be his 6th parish. Besides this, he's enjoyed traveling to Ireland and Mexico especially. He's a student of history and considers himself a part-time golfer and an avid photographer. Joy is the motivating factor of his spiritual and priestly life. Since 2022, when he agreed to host a parish conversation where survivors and parishioners would meet one another, Father Peter has been a faithful supporter of the work of CLC in exploring ways to pursue further healing for survivors of clergy sexual abuse. And with that, I will turn it over to our wonderful panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. The first part of our time together is going to consist of a presentation that I actually prepared for a conference last November at St. Paul University in Ottawa. It was a conference put on about reestablishing trust or restoring trust in the church. So at the end of my presentation, we will then move into the panel because what I tell in the presentation is really the story of our journey together over the last 5 years, the 5 of us here. And I just want to, before I start, give a shout out to Sister Nuala Kenny, who you will see in my presentation. Sister Nuala is here today. I'll just quickly spotlight her for a second, and then there's Sister Nuala. She's been a dear friend to us since the very beginning. Many of you will know Sister Nuala's work. You'll have read her books. Some of you may have heard her presentations. And so much of what you're going to hear this afternoon is directly due to having crossed paths and the Holy Spirit bringing us together at a critical moment, and then her continued support for what we're doing. So thank you, Nuala, for being here today. Before I begin, I want to say that this is a particularly Canadian story. Everything here took place in Canada in the Canadian Church, and it reflects a journey undertaken in a particular place and at a particular time by a particular group of individuals. So what we're sharing today is our story and our experience as we've walked together. I believe it holds lessons that may be helpful for people in other locations, but it is for those people in those other locations to make that determination. We don't speak for anybody else. This quote from Pope Francis on synodality shows us, he says that the gospel frequently shows us Jesus on a journey where he walks alongside people and listens to the questions and concerns lurking in their hearts. He shows us that God is not found in neat and orderly places, distant from reality, but walks ever at our side. He meets us where we are, on the often rocky roads of life. So whether trust is placed in an individual or an institution, it can be traumatic when trust is broken. The clergy sexual spiritual abuse crisis in the Catholic Church has caused a crisis of trust among victim survivors, their families, friends, and communities. And beyond the immediate circles of survivors, many lay faithful too have had their trust broken. What is to be done about the wounding, the pain and suffering that this violation of trust has caused? Healing is the hallmark of Jesus' ministry. If, therefore, the church were to have one core competency, it should be healing. And yet, when it comes to clergy sexual abuse, healing continues to elude us. The word synod comes from the Greek synhodos, meaning a common path. To be synodal means to walk together on a shared path. Concerned Lay Catholics has taken a synodal approach to walking with survivors. We didn't begin with a set preconceived ideas, but rather with an openness to learn through forming relationships and sharing information and experiences, a process which creates trust. A synodal approach with its emphasis on listening makes it possible for us to reestablish relationships of trust among those wounded by the reality of clergy sexual abuse. This presentation is divided into 4 sections: a journey together, how we entered and traversed the terrain of clergy sexual abuse, a call to genuine encounter, the places of encounter that we discovered or created along the way, a call to mission, the actions that are available to the church, bishops, priests, and lay people in responding pastorally to clergy sexual abuse, and a call to communion, an understanding of communion that does not romanticize it, but holds the promise of true at-homeness with others on the path. In the wake of the Pennsylvania grand jury report on clergy sexual abuse and the announcement by Pope Francis to convene a church summit on the issue, a small group of concerned lay Catholics set out on a journey in the fall of 2018 seeking answers. This issue was impacting our faith and that of our fellow parishioners. People were leaving the church because of the failure of the church's leadership to speak honestly and humbly about the situation. We experienced silence in our churches and obstruction when we sought answers. Unwilling to say it's useless, we pressed on. Our journey began in prayer, reflection, and self-education. We wanted an opportunity to share with others how the crisis was affecting us, our faith, our families, and our friendships. We also wanted to educate ourselves as to what was happening by way of response in our local diocese and in the wider church. We didn't begin by thinking we already knew what was going on. We recognized that we needed to learn first before we did anything. The journey has been a 5-year process that went from September 2018 to June 2023, a journey which took us to unexpected places and into relationships with people we didn't know. Each step built on the one before. In all of this, we were confident in the Spirit's guidance. There was much we didn't know, and it wasn't easy to find reliable information about how the church is dealing with clergy sexual abuse. This was even more true in 2018. While the secular media provides an invaluable service by breaking stories, it's not privy to the deeper church context, and so is limited. At church on Sunday, we heard nothing from the pulpit. We checked diocesan websites and found, apart from obscure links to reporting protocols and volunteer screening processes, there was little to indicate the church was doing anything of a pastoral nature about the issue. Almost by happenstance, we learned of the existence of a document published by the Canadian bishops in 2018, Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse, a call to the Catholic faithful in Canada for healing, reconciliation, and transformation. In spite of some challenges in obtaining a copy, we found the bishop's document to be excellent. At a symposium, The Wounded Body of Christ, Listening and Responding to Abuse in the Church, held in March 2019 by St. Michael's College in Toronto, we gained a deeper appreciation for the complexity of the issue. We also formed key relationships with Sister Nuala Kenny and Father Stefan Koppler, expert resource people who became good friends and helped facilitate more connections, such as with Dr. Carlin de Mazur. At about this time, a small group of concerned lay Catholics was forming in the Diocese of St. Catharines. Moved by a newspaper article in the secular press about a survivor of clergy sexual abuse, Brenda Coleman, a retired mental health nurse and a devout Catholic, reached out to us. Brenda learned of us through Sister Nuala. This is an example of the organic nature of synodality, when we are actively seeking to discern where the Spirit is leading. There was no map telling the St. Catharines group to connect with the group in Hamilton, and the group in Hamilton didn't anticipate the St. Mike's Symposium would connect it with the group in St. Catharines. It happened through a series of steps, each one, in retrospect, taken under the guidance of the Spirit. Over a period of about 2 years, we'd read books and articles, attended webinars, watched documentaries, and interviewed people. Having reliable information about an issue so tender and potentially triggering is a critical part of creating trust and promoting healing. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that the church doesn't make it easy for ordinary people to find out what's being done in response to the issue of clergy sexual abuse. We also learned the church is doing some important things, but people don't know. The lack of transparency continues to be a barrier to trust. We learned that more and different actions are needed on the part of the church's leadership, and that this fact often overshadows the good they may be doing. We also learned there are many initiatives underway. Many groups have sprung up outside of the official leadership circles to address issues of concern. And these are making a difference for survivors and could be a source of expertise for church leaders. There's no roadmap to follow. We're creating a path where there is none. And we're doing this by coming together with others to share experiences, respectfully asking questions of our leaders, doing our own research, finding allies within official church structures, overcoming our timidity and reaching out to survivors, and not giving up ever, and finding creative ways around institutional barriers. The Synodal project includes a call to genuine encounter, an invitation to listen humbly to each other, recognizing that every human being carries within them a unique story that contains some aspect of divine truth. Our stories are unique and reveal who we are. It's in listening to and sharing our stories in mutual vulnerability that trust is established. Pope Francis tells us every encounter, as we know, calls for openness, courage, and a willingness to let ourselves be challenged by the presence and the stories of others. The willingness to listen to another's story, even if it makes us uncomfortable, is the first step in establishing trust. Our colleague Brenda Coleman entered into such an encounter when she made the decision to walk alongside the survivor who was protesting outside the parish where he was abused. In the spirit of openness and courage described by Pope Francis, Brenda took a risk and allowed herself to be challenged by this survivor's story. At the March 2019 symposium at St. Michael's College, we had another example of encounter which broke open a painful but liberating truth. Lay people are sometimes complicit in the rewounding of victim survivors of clergy sexual abuse, often due to ignorance about the nature of trauma or due to their own discomfort with the subject. When one survivor on the panel at that symposium asked, "Do lay people recognize us as their brothers and sisters? Do they even think of us? Do they pray for us?" She hit the mark. She pointed us in a direction we had previously not considered. Our responsibility as lay people had to go beyond pointing to the failings of the institution and church leadership. We realized as a group of concerned lay Catholics we could play a role in educating the laity about clergy sexual abuse and begin to reach out to survivors in a spirit of prayerful compassion to foster healing. We had the power ourselves to begin to build trust with survivors. Concerned lay Catholics identified places where encounter could happen through the sharing of stories and experiences, and these included synodal listening sessions. These sessions were offered to allow survivors and their supporters a voice in the synodal process, which may have otherwise left them out. We hosted a series of 3 listening sessions, 1 with survivors of clergy sexual abuse, 2 with survivors of clergy sexual abuse and their families, and a 3rd with survivors of clergy sexual abuse, their families, and ourselves, concerned laity. The depth of pain and sense of loss and longing expressed by survivors and their loved ones in these 3 sessions cannot be adequately summarized. But we do have a report. Their comments can be found in the report on our synodal conversations and on our website. I would say there were no examples in those sessions of victim survivors or their families receiving spiritual help from the church, or any sense that survivors have something of value to offer the church. Survivors felt that the church, through its agents, seemed intent on breaking survivors' spirits even further. In spite of this, survivors and their families exhibited unbelievable wisdom and grace alongside their justifiable anger and disgust. First Friday Fellowship was something that we built on after the synodal listening sessions. We discerned at the end of the synodal listening sessions that the conversation needed to continue somehow. We had just begun to get to know one another, and trust was only tentatively established. What might follow-up look like? So we agreed it needed to be extended over a longer period. It would still involve sharing using the Synodal Listening Model, but we felt some input or theme to focus each session was needed. Our generous supporters agreed to share their input as a jumping off point for shared reflection, and we landed the concept of meeting on the first Fridays. Prayer was incorporated, but at the end to allow survivors who were uncomfortable with prayer to bow out. Another place of encounter were the parish conversations. We mentioned this in Father Peter's introduction or bio. Our synodal listening sessions had revealed the desire on the part of some survivors to tell their stories in parishes. And we also knew that parishioners felt this would be beneficial for them too. So in local parish conversations, survivors told their stories, and parishioners asked questions and shared their experiences as well. We found the presenters were not always the only survivors in the room. Holding it in the parish with the pastor present and actively participating was crucial for both the survivors and the parishioners. This made it an official action of the church, sanctioned by the pastor. That fact gave the experience the added dimension of institutional authority and accountability. Meeting with the pastor and parish leadership ahead of time was a key element of the planning. Hosting a parish conversation requires careful planning and facilitation to mitigate risks such as leaving people feeling more discouraged, potentially triggered, and even rewounding. But we found they were grace-filled moments of encounter. So what we learned from this next stage in our journey, this journey of encounter. We learned that no matter where clergy sexual abuse survivors are on their journey, they carry with them not only emotional, psychological, and physical wounds, but also spiritual wounds. All deserve to have their stories heard by the church that wounded them. These are some of the specifics we learned. While we strive always for safe space, we understand that all human encounters involve some degree of risk. It might be more accurate to speak of brave space. We learned there's no substitute for taking all the time necessary to build trust. Change happens at the speed of relationships. We learned that even in their pain, survivors are incredibly gracious, generous, and compassionate. It's important to plan and let people know what to expect. Then follow the plan as faithfully as possible, and if you must change it, tell people. It's all part of building trust. It's also a way of providing guardrails around what is by its nature a very risky undertaking. Here we have some quotes from our good friends who were with us on the journey. We found it helpful for the in-person meetings to have trained trauma practitioners on hand for anyone who might need support in the moment. For any online sessions we had, we offered self-care guidelines and access to online crisis support services. We learned that informal as well as formal modes of encounter are beneficial. Leaving time between encounters to allow people to process what they've experienced is a good thing too, but we always need to be available for check-ins. Survivors appreciate and tell us they benefit from the unofficial efforts of the laity, yet they still feel something is missing. And that gap seems to be pastoral action by the official leadership of the church. And that's not to say that pastoral actions aren't happening, but they're not known. And that makes it very difficult for people to feel that it's happening unless they're personally involved. So a call to mission, and in this section, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that could look like from a church point of view. Being a synodal church in mission emphasizes collaboration, listening, and shared decision-making. A synodal church seeks to embody the principles of dialogue and participation, fostering a sense of unity and collective responsibility among all members. For marginalized groups, such as survivors of clerical sexual abuse, it means centering their voices and allowing them to define the agenda. Nothing about us without us. At every step on our journey, we sought to apply these synodal principles. Pope Francis has compared the church to an orchestra, with everyone playing a different instrument and the leaders as conductors helping to produce beautiful symphonic sound. This image implies a diversity of roles and yet a unity of mission and purpose. While we cannot all do the same thing, everyone can do something. Identifying that something and doing it is the work of mission. If not me, who? If not now, when? So in our pursuit of mission, we traveled some distance. We have learned, however, that lay people can only go so far to restore trust without complementary engagement from official church leadership. So here we offer some concrete suggestions for what can be done by those who occupy the different roles in the church. What can lay people do? First of all, educate yourself about the issue in all its dimensions and do it with others who are also concerned. Learn about the phenomenon of childhood sexual abuse and trauma. Listen to survivor stories. Challenge your assumptions and check your judgments. Work through your outrage and indignation and use it to energize the question, what's to be done? Speak with your pastor. See if there's an openness to do something. Perhaps he'll agree to a parish conversation like Father Peter did. Ask your bishop what's happening in your diocese to support survivors and offer to help. Pray for survivors and don't give up. What can pastors do? Be open to questions from your parishioners. Try not to be defensive. Educate yourself about how the Canadian Church is responding. Read the CCCB document. Share your knowledge with your parishioners and be willing to learn from them. Don't be afraid to preach about it when the occasion arises. There's a very good chance that within your congregation, there is a survivor of clergy sexual abuse or a friend or family member of a clergy sexual abuse survivor. Find them. Host a parish conversation where survivors can tell stories to their fellow Catholics. This alone can be a source of great healing for some survivors. Request professional development on the issue at your priest's council. Talk with your brother priests and your bishop. Suggest a coordinated diocesan pastoral response be developed for pastors to use in keeping with the CCCB document. What can bishops do? Take a synodal approach to the issue, bring together diverse voices to discern a way forward. Create a permanent structure so that the work is sustained over time and not a series of one-off events. Consider empowering your bishop's delegate and safeguarding committee to lead the planning process, but make sure all diocesan and parish personnel are part of the conversation. Use the lessons in the CCCB document to guide the work. Educate all diocesan staff in the lessons and invite the various departments to find themselves within it. Adopt a trauma-informed approach to pastoral work at the diocesan and the parish level. Most people carry some form of trauma, so it will be generally beneficial to everyone's pastoral practice. Don't host a day of prayer unless other actions are taking place. we heard a lot from survivors about words without actions. Find out who the survivors are that are living within your diocese. Using established best practices, reach out and invite them into conversation. Meet with survivors if they ask, but recognize this will be limited in effectiveness if other pastoral actions are not also underway. Send a strong signal to pastors that you encourage them to hold parish encounters with abuse survivors and provide them with tools and resources as needed. Consider reporting annually the number and types of allegations you receive. You don't need to reveal names or breach confidentiality. So that's for bishops. And those are some things that each group in the church, the laity, pastors, and bishops can do. You don't have to do all of them. You don't have to do all of them at once. It's just important to set out on the path. The final section is a call to communion. Synodality must lead us to live more intensely our ecclesial communion, in which the diversity of charisms, vocations, and ministries are harmoniously integrated, animated by the same baptism, which makes us all sons and daughters in the Son. We must be careful not to sentimentalize communion. This is me speaking now, not Pope Francis. It's not the absence of difference or of conflict, but rather the gift of connectedness that holds us together in the face of difference and conflict. Communion is not about everyone getting along. It's not about everybody agreeing or even liking each other. Communion is about engaging with another's reality through genuine encounter. Listening with the ear of the heart, as Pope Francis says, and accepting it as it is. Communion, if it's genuine and not manufactured, does not judge or try to change another's reality, but accepts it and allows oneself to be changed by it. Parker Palmer, one of my favorite theologians, has an understanding of the nature of community, which I would argue equates with Francis's understanding of communion, and I think it might be helpful here. Hard experiences, Parker Palmer says, such as meeting the enemy within or dealing with the conflict and betrayal that are an inevitable part of living closely with others, are not the death knell of community. They're the gateway into the real thing. But we will never walk through that gate if we cling to a romantic image of community as the Garden of Eden. After the first flush of romance, community is less like a garden and more like a crucible. One stays in the crucible only if one is committed to being refined by fire. We seek community. If we seek community merely in order to be happy, the seeking will end at the gate. If we want community in order to confront the unhappiness we carry within ourselves, the experiment may go on, and happiness, or better, a sense of at-homeness, may be its paradoxical outcome. As we walk a common path with others and allow ourselves to be changed by genuine encounters along the way, we find ourselves at home on the journey. Indeed, the journey is home. Supported by the gifts of connectedness that hold us together in the face of challenges and trials, we enter the mystery of interconnectedness, which is communion. Let me share a little story by way of illustration. This is from former chaplain at Notre Dame University in the 60s and 70s. His name was Bob Griffin, and he was a much beloved chaplain by the young people there. And he wrote a beautiful book called In the Kingdom of the Lonely God. And in this book, he has this story. I once heard of a man who sold a flock of homing pigeons to an ornithologist who lived in a town 25 miles away. To ground the pigeons in their new hutch, the ornithologist clipped the wings of the birds so that they could not return to their original home. 2 weeks later, the first owner looked out his window. There, trudging down the road, were the pigeons coming home to their natal roost. Unable to fly, the birds had walked over 25 miles on sore and bloody feet to the spot that instinct told them was their own true home. Our own true home is in the heart of God, and the path to the nesting place is through the lives of others. Whether on wings or on tired and bloody feet, we must travel the road of love. Interestingly enough, we do not make the journey alone, but with others as tired and clipped as ourselves. So this is a story of a small group of people in a particular place in a particular time who set out on a journey to learn how to respond to the suffering of our brothers and sisters who have been wounded by our church. The church should be a place of safety and refuge for all, especially the most vulnerable. Instead of safety, some found injury. Instead of refuge, they found threat. Trust was broken. As we journeyed, we discovered that trust can be reestablished through genuine encounter and a commitment to the mission of Christ's healing message. We found that healing is possible in a communion of fellow travelers just trying to get home. So thank you to all of you, and especially to the folks listed here on the last slide who have all been part of our journey. Just gonna stop sharing now, and I'm going to, while you just absorb, reflect for a few moments, I'm going to put the spotlight on my panel colleagues, and then we can move into a bit of a conversation.
Home on Pigeons has a way of cheering me up every time I hear it.
Mhm. I always find it hard to read, Val, without breaking up.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you get
I
through
almost
it.
got through it today.
I don't know how you get through it.
So, actually, our panelists are more than welcome to share from your perspective any aspect of this story that you feel is important from your point of view, and please share that with our participants today.
Yeah, I'll start off. I'll tell you, Catherine, I am deeply moved by your presentation. Having been a participant and having had the gift of walking this path with yourself and with Brenda and Father Peter, and then Val and I, we had known each other before. And to hear you put it into that segment is so important, because myself and the experiences I have, and I won't go into all the detail, but the essence of what I and the organization that I started, Recovery Speaking Initiative, what we want to do is we believe we have to have a new conversation. The issue of sexual abuse and clerical sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, the old conversation is no longer working. It does, I don't know if it ever did, but it's certainly not working now. And the adversarial type of contest that we get into it just is doing nothing. And that does not mean to be disrespect to any clergy, any of the church, any of the lawyers, any of the legal or judicial system. We are blessed, having been through, right through to trial in the Superior Court of Appeal in Ontario, having experienced that. I feel blessed that we had a system where I could have a voice after a number of years. So I'm not saying it, but it's that battling and warfare mentality isn't good for survivors. We get a couple of bucks maybe, but we don't heal. And the church isn't healing. And I really struggle with feeling that church is it. I don't feel that church is my church, and I miss that. I miss that. And so CLC, and I love the presentation of what you did in the growth and the development and the synchronicity of how things occurred and when they occurred, and even, my being involved with you through Brenda and then meeting you. It's such a gift, and I feel good for the first time since really taking this mantle up and starting RSI in 2019, that we're starting to have that new conversation. And the stupidity is I have no idea what that conversation is supposed to be, but I know I feel it. And I feel the sincerity as a survivor of clerical sexual abuse that has impacted my entire life. I feel for the first time closer to being home within the institution of a Catholic church because of concerned lay Catholics and because of priests like Father Peter, who's with us today. That doesn't come easy because I wasn't trusting any of you. I didn't want anything to do with you, but maybe I could pursue RSI. So it was all very selfish. But I'm a better man for it today. And I thank you for the words you shared and the process you've shown, the depth of what can be done, that we can bring that new conversation and have a new way of dealing with this that gives dignity, that gives that we can both walk away from the negotiation table of the church and the survivor with our head held high. We don't have to feel like one has been beaten, because that doesn't work anymore. So thank you for putting it together, and thank for the work that you and Brendan and Father Peter and all of your nationwide CLC. I'm honored to be a partner with you in this.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, for saying that. I think the dynamic duo of Catherine and Brenda needs to be replicated across the country, and I think the courage that Father Peter has is what was missing. I think that really is what showed me that there was hope, because it just didn't seem like there was. See what you did, Kathy? Oh man. Father Peter gave me hope.
Mhm.
You look for it. You kind of hope that someone's got the balls to stand up. Well, these two women here on the panel smashed the door down, and Father Peter invited us in. Well, there's a lot of white-haired women in this room right now. I think you got a lot of warriors right now. We need a lot of people to do exactly what they did. Smash the doors down and stand up for what's right. It's that simple. We belong back in the church and not on the street swearing about it. That's really, I think these people on the panel are amazing. Thank you very much for having me here today.
I'm not going to interrupt Father Peter and Brenda, but I just want to say none of this is possible without Bob and Val, and they had the courage to enter into this process with us. And there's so much wisdom and generosity and compassion in their hearts for 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 those of us in the church who are trying to figure out what to do about this. So just wanted, Father Peter will probably have more to say, and Brenda, but I just want to say, yeah, it's walking together. It's this idea of a synodal process of walking together and listening to each other, being willing to learn from each other, being willing to take risks together. That's really what's going on here, and it's the spirit that makes that possible. And as Bob said, all those other things are important. Going to court, getting settlements, getting some kind of restitution or some kind of reparation, all of that's important. We're not saying what we're doing replaces people's legal rights, their mental health rights, there's whatever. But what we're saying is that's not enough. There's something else that's missing. And as a church, we need to look at that and find out from survivors what that is so that together, we can find that so that, as Bob said, we can all be healed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob and Val, for that very heartwarming and open beginning there to what Kathy shared. I I was looking back on the introduction given there that I kind of pieced together about my own life. And as you were sharing, both of you, I got thinking maybe all of this in the past has just prepared me for what took place in 2022 and meeting you both and working alongside Brenda and then Kathy together. Uh, I I think it all builds in the history of my own life and priestly life, but it becomes, I guess, like help me out there with this quote about seeing things as they are and asking why and maybe saying something about why thing what's the rest of that and say why not. I'm echoing RFK.
Robert Kennedy, dreaming
Yes,
things that never were and saying why not.
exactly.
Mhm.
And the prophet Joel, but also just to say that that was my attitude when Brenda uh, took it upon herself to meet up with me and other members of our parish, a team that were working on the synod discussions. Kathy referred to them amply. Uh, it was powerful what happened here in Niagara on the Lake, where we had so many come together for those various groups. And this issue came up as it should, and we wanted to address it. And I'm grateful to you, Brenda, for putting it forward so that we could have such an evening. And these two gentlemen came, and I have to say, it was a remarkable time to meet them and their special people. And then we traveled over to the hall, and what I heard that night was a complete something very complete and candid on their part. And this aching, nagging, longing sense to be part of church. And that was the wow factor for me, listening to them. Um, and it wasn't that they were talking very easily about a gut wrenching issue. They were very open about it. And I think the people who were there really got something out of that. And they really want to say, let's move forward. let's go places. And and I didn't know what to expect beyond that day. I went again to another parish down the road because the parish priest there was unable to be there. But again, I had the same experience coming away from that. It's humbling. It's awe-inspiring at the same time. And I know there's a whole lot more to do on my part, but maybe speaking largely here about the faith community we are. So I just wanted to give that as a little intro to my own experience.
Well, speaking for myself, I would be interested in hearing what the audience's take on what you've heard so far is. Kathy very eloquently alluded to my part in this whole thing, so I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But I'd like to hear from you, our audience, any of your comments. Not an easy subject. Not an easy subject, I know that.
I am moved far more than I thought I would be. The presentation was extremely succinct, showing the progression and Val and Bob, I am inspired by your courage. I was brought to tears, and I thank you for that because it makes me move, and bringing that awareness and what I can do in my little corner to help change this on your behalf and on behalf of many, many others. So I am very, very grateful to have had the opportunity to sit in on today. So thank you, all of you, very much.
Kathy, if I may speak up, I will. Brian Trafford from Vernon, BC. I begin by complimenting all of you for your courage in coming forward uh, in one capacity or another to describe to people like me what has happened over the history of the church. I've done a lot of reading on this, and I'm always impressed with Sister Kenny's work. However, I always get to the point of saying to myself, what on earth are the powers that be within the Catholic Church's bureaucracy in Canada presently doing about this? They never tell us anything. It's as if it's a great conspiracy of silence. And I keep telling myself that shepherds of the flock ought not to be behaving this way. There's a problem extant within our faith community. It's been there historically. There's been some great initiatives by many people that pull us in the right direction, but we never seem to reach the fruition of a good, sound Catholic response to this problem. So I say to myself, what should we be doing? Somehow, I speak in the abstract. I know this is difficult, Kathy, and you've undoubtedly thought about this and may have answers to it that I don't have. But somehow we got to mobilize the bishops in Canada to get onto this issue and do what should be done. A lot of them are truly outstanding people. Most of them, I suspect, by way of intellectual capacity that they would bring to bear on this issue. The CCCB, to me, despite the efforts of Sister Kenny and many people like her, isn't active enough in saying to the bishops of Canada, look, here is the problem. We're advising you to do this. Do it. And set up protocols for them, because although there's many, as I say, terrific bishops and auxiliary bishops who've got resources and ability to do this at the local level, there's many who are far removed from that. They don't have the resources. It's as if they're frightened to get into this because they think they may miss the mark and do something that's not driven by Catholic principle. I just think we've got a great faith community in part that's missing the mark here radically. Somehow, we, the laity who are interested in this, have to do something that leads them to prayerfully conclude that we must get into this further than what we have and make things happen. So I don't know the answer to this. I've thought of doing something at the local level. I'm in the Diocese of Kamloops, and our bishop, I've dealt with him from time to time on issues kind of collateral to this, is a very conservative, decent, prayerful man. So he's not likely to take any radical steps and come up with protocols along the lines that you've advocated, Kathy, which are, to me, outstanding in principle and in focus. So I'm not sure what to do. I think what I'm going to do is talk to the deacon, who seems to be the bishop's more or less right hand, and say, look, there's some issues that, in my view, should be determined here. Are they live issues on the bishop's agenda at this point in time? If so, tell us about it. There's lots of lay people out there who've got lots of ideas who may be very helpful to the bishop in formulating what should happen in his diocese at the various parishes level. The key thing is, look, you've got to be a shepherd of the flock. You are, but you're not on this issue. So let's get moving here and do something such that, in due course, which will be longer than most of us would like to think should be, we can say we've done something. We've moved us from this crisis to an effective system that's principled and inspires confidence, not only within the faith community, the victims and others who are indirectly affected by this, but in outsiders who are looking to us as an example of how we should be doing things in our church.
It looks as if Kurt Hammond has his hand up there.
Right. Go ahead, Kurt.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. And I'm just staying off camera for with technical issues. I just want to thank you for the chance to be a part of this. I have the honor of serving as chair of RSI, and I just share that because I want you to know that behind Bob, the great man that he is, are people who care about this issue, are looking to help with resolution, are looking to help with healing. And so we've got infrastructure and we've got people and we've got a passion for this. And to your earlier speaker's comment, as you are thinking about what comes next, and Bob has already said this, but I just want to reiterate, RSI is here to walk alongside you in partnership, focused on the needs of victims and survivors, obviously, to look for ways we can be working on this together. So I just want to, again, thank you for the chance to be a part of this and be listening in. And RSI, as you are exploring this, RSI is here to be a partner in this, always focused on the needs of victim survivors. And we really do want to be exploring what good partnership and healing could look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Glad you're here.
I would say in partial response to Brian, is that we've been really trying to faithfully discern how the Spirit is calling us, and all we can do is continue to provide our best kind of advice, if you will, our best reading of the church documents, and our best reading of all the expertise that's being applied to this issue in the work we do, in hope that change doesn't come in a big wave I'm sure, the change is incremental. Change comes when a little seed gets into a little crack and takes root and sprouts, and over time gets big enough to actually force that crack open and have more of the plant emerge. And we are trying to be trying to be humble about what we can do, and at the same time model a way of working together, survivors, laity, clergy, to really explore what healing looks like. I mean, when Brian says, they need to do something, I don't know that it's clear what needs to be done if survivors aren't actually in the conversation. So, so I would just say, there's a long view here. There's the idea that, you have to step back and take the long view. But I think what we've discovered together is that healing can happen right now with or without the bishops. And sometimes we miss the small, like the grace in the relationships and in the commitment to walking together. I don't like giving the power for my spiritual health and my well-being to anybody. And I think Jesus told everybody he met that they have the power in themselves as a child of God to stand up and walk or to be healed. And that's really, for me, the repeated discovery in my life is that it's when we come together and we share and we walk together in faith that we take that power back to be healed. The church should be encouraging people to do that. And we would like to see more of the opportunities that Father Peter gave, for example, where when we brought together survivors and parishioners and allowed them and encouraged them to have an encounter, everybody left those sessions feeling something happened there. And there was no bishop in the room. Something happened there. And it's up to the Spirit, it's up to everybody to take what they got from that and bring it into their life wherever they go. But we don't need to control all that. It's not about us controlling the agenda. It's about us creating the space for that healing to happen, which does happen when human beings come together and truly listen to each other in compassion and humility. Go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
No, please, no need to be sorry. I want to come at this with something. I really asked you to not jump to a conclusion of what I'm going to say. Please listen. And I want to come at it from a survivor, victim/survivor, whatever hook you want to put to this, but I'm a survivor, if not a warrior right now. And one of the challenges in this, and I think it's important that we don't lose sight as survivors. I can't speak for the lay clergy or for the clergy of the church. But I have to have a whole new look at that Catholic Church as an institution, and then I have to look at individual priests and nuns and representatives of the church altogether different. I have to have a psychic change because you guys screwed me up my entire life, and everything else that has gone wrong is because of you attitude doesn't cut it anymore because it's a lie. And I've had to learn that in my healing. And for survivors we can go through the court systems and we can get the 100,000, 500,000, million, 2 million, whatever the case may be, but that isn't going to give the healing. And I think it's similar in our connection comes because that's what I see your congregations going through. They've been traumatized by having a predator priest in their parish, maybe, or the whole issue of how the church is looked at on this and how could the church say this and not this. But we as survivors, we need to come to the table not wanting to pick the fight. We need to put the weapons down over here. And that's hard to do because it has to call, and I'm not going to speak for Val, I'm just speaking for me, but the biggest thing I had to do was forgive my abuser, which I was able to do, and go to his gravesite and read an 8-page letter of forgiveness and a 4-page letter of amend that I have a 12-step program says I have to do. And I'll talk to anybody about that separately. But one of the other things that happened just because of this is a gentleman who is on here right now, maybe a year ago, year and a half ago, Mr. Brian, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here today. Said, well, if you've forgiven the priest, why can't you forgive the church? And man, I've been working ever since you said that a year and a half ago. I've been working at this, but I'm still not there. But it's closer because of this connection we have together. So yes, the church has to change and there has to be significant changes and it has to be very political and all that stuff. But from a survivor standpoint, it is responsible for Val and I to carry that message to survivors to say, don't come in here screaming and yelling. Come on, we can discuss and we can hold people accountable, but we don't need to come in here with the guns blazing. We have to find a level of forgiveness, radical acceptance of our situation and looking at our life 180 degrees different and stop being a victim. Yeah, was it bad? Absolutely. Do we need to change so that we come to you in partnership, not as the victim of stuff looking for you to do something for us? No, let us tell you what we need from you. And that isn't very clear right now. And we're working at clarifying that so we can say to the bishops, to CLC, to Father Peters, this is what we need from you. And it's not just hearing our story. And it's not just, saying words but not having consequences. We're getting a lot of words and a lot of consequences, but it's those two aren't matching up. The church is saying this, but it's doing this. And we want to be at the table talking to you, as Catherine said. I want to sit at that table with Father Peter after playing 18 holes and he's kicked my butt on a golf course down in Niagara on the lake in the summer. Boy, that's tough to take.
Only part-time, Bob.
There we go. But to sit there and really disagree on a factor, but we can walk away saying, okay, we're going to come at it again. Because that's the connection I feel with these people. And that's the message Val and I are obligated to carry to other survivors so they're not just coming in as victims wanting to fight. So it's important for survivors have a responsibility to come on board with this too. I think that's important to understand. And again, I'm speaking for me. I don't pretend to speak for Val.
No, but I'd like to answer something that Brian said as well, saying that about the bishops, what are they doing? Well, everybody here can obviously see that the bishops have been basically marching to their own tune for a long time because nobody has challenged them. Nobody has basically held them accountable. You, as the laity, you're the church, not the bishops. The bishops march to your tune. They will do whatever it is that you guys command them to do. It is no different than any other, like a union and a car company. Why do you keep driving the same car that was recalled, that caused deaths? Why do you keep driving that same car? Because you're a Chrysler person, you're a Ford guy. Okay, it was taken out of context because that little baby died, but I'm still going to drive my $80,000 car. And this is what the church is. The church is a place where it brings the community together. It is the community of God. It's where everybody comes in to find God. But you can find them in every corner because I've had to do that. But I miss the community aspect, the coming together of people, because I'm not welcome in the Catholic Church. That's what my feeling my entire life. It takes the laity, it takes a lot of people caring. You guys care. You guys wouldn't be giving up your Sundays here to be here listening to this. So the way to do it is we've got to communicate this openly to all the laity so that they feel the same way. We're not aberrations that were created. This was a mistake that happened. And Bob and I had to find forgiveness in our hearts so that we can move forward in a different way. I had to forgive my guy because I was going to burn up and die if I didn't. I was a flame on fire. And it took a very simple statement from Kathy that's burned in my head. What about the priests that didn't commit a crime, that didn't do anything? They've had to live under this umbrella and do their work with this hatred for them. Father Peter takes his life into his own hands every time he wears his collar out on the street. That's not right. Not when you're doing something to help the community. You can help a lot of people by just bringing the word of what we just learned today out to the rest of the people that you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Val. I used to do a lot of visiting. I probably visited for over 35 years at the hospitals. And one of the things, the toughest things, was being a layperson walking cold into a room and trying to bring the sacrament or the church to them. And one of the things I got a lot was, I don't want the church in here. I said, yeah, but I'm talking about God. God didn't do that to you, and God wouldn't do that to you. And those are the hard things. And to try to express love for the people in their pain, I'm glad that Kathy was able to help you understand. You know, what about that? The people that are also in pain because of what happens in that church. You know, I'm glad you were able to find that. And sometimes I would go back week after week to see these people, not to bug them, but just to tell them that I cared and how are they doing today. And after a while, we could have some really nice conversations because they really realized I was just trying to bring them the love of God that they deserved. God loved them, and I was just trying to reach out. And it's the same with our priests that have not done any of that, or our sisters who have not done it, or any of the adults in our church working in ministry who have not done any of that. It's not their fault, all this nonsense, all this awful stuff. But it caused a lot of people pain. And it caused the people watching it and seeing the fallout also a lot of pain. It takes a great deal of courage to want to go back into that and make it better. And we do have to find a way to make it better. We really do. Thank you, Bob and Val.
You're welcome.
Well, if no one wants to share any more this afternoon, and if you would like to, please put your little icon up, your little hand icon, or just put your hand up. We're happy to hear anything else for the last few minutes. But I just want to say I said at the beginning of the presentation, there's no path. Traveler, there is no path. We create the path by walking. Paths aren't roads. Roads are predetermined and they involve trucks and construction and human human effort. Paths emerge as people walk together in a direction together. And we still don't know where this is going. But we felt we had learned enough by this stage to say something about what we learned. And I'm so grateful for Bob and Val and Father Peter and Brenda, but particularly Bob and Val for being on this webinar today, because big risk. This is not easy. It's not easy to say we need to change the conversation. It's not easy to say, even though I was victimized by them, I have compassion for priests who don't abuse and have to walk around with the burden of that shame. That's courageous to say those things. But honestly, I believe what Bob is saying, if we don't change the conversation, and we don't know what the new one really looks like, we know what it's been for us, and we're not saying everybody will do it that way. But there's that old adage, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. And so we do believe that there's a good guide in the 2018 CCCB document. There are 9 lessons in there that apply to almost probably every aspect. And Sister Nuala was one of the principal authors of that document, so it shouldn't surprise us that it's so good. Taking that document and trying to implement it in every location in the church, as Brian is saying we need to do. Brian is saying this is a CCCB document. So it takes some commitment to take that document and apply it in a diocese. But the lessons are there. And I guess what I'm hoping might happen because of our work is that people will realize it's not as scary as you think. It's not as hard as you might imagine. People are good. People don't want to stay angry. That doesn't mean they don't have a right to be angry and that they don't need to deal with their anger and process their anger. And where that has to happen, the church needs to support that until that anger is expiated and that person can now restore their own peace. So I'm not talking about papering over things, I'm talking about that last thing about the crucible. So going into the crucible and discovering when you go in that communion and at homeness is what actually results.
Kathy, I'm heading out to night prayer.
Okay.
And I have to say this.
Thank you, sister.
I am overwhelmed with gratitude to God and to each and every one of you for the grace and courage and wisdom that you're bringing to this horrible problem. I'm just writing something on the atrocities of war for the La Croix International Catholic newspaper I write for. And there's a line I use there that suddenly came to my mind as I heard folks talking here. The line that I used is, silence and inaction in the face of evil is complicity. And I want you to know, I am so moved. I was moved in 1988, 20 years before you got involved in this, kid. Remember that, Kathy? By the pain and suffering, empathically entering into the suffering of the good people of Newfoundland. When I had been called 1988, guys, and I was a pediatrician, always caring for the abuse team in the hospitals in which I served or led. But what I'm saying to you now is that you're not silent. You're not failing to act. And as Kathy keeps saying, we're finding the path for what needs to be done next. But with trust in the power of the Holy Spirit, we can be open. And I just remind you, my right now, one of our biggest challenges is that both the lay faithful and bishops and priests, good and not so good, are suffering what we call in medicine tragedy fatigue. They're so damn tired. Sorry, Sister Nuala swore. They're so damn tired and we're losing people from the faith for lots of other reasons than this. But clergy abuse is a major issue that people have said, I can't do this anymore. So remember that abuse is an abuse of power, position, and conscience. And right now, our efforts to raise this, all the aspects that you beautifully, I'm going to ask you to send me your slides, Kathy, because I want to cite you now in a number of things I'm going to write, that I am writing or will write. But God bless. Kathy, you and I were meant to meet. And for every one of the rest of you, especially Bob and Val, man, you guys are good. We get along real well. God bless and thank you.
Thank you, Sister Kenny.
Thank you, Nuala. I'm aware that it's the time we committed to bring this to a close. It's never easy after a hard conversation. So I would please, Maureen's going to wrap us up in a second, but I wanted to say to everybody, please take care of yourselves. Please do what you need to do after this session today. Go for a walk, hug someone, listen to some beautiful music, whatever you need, please take care of yourselves. This is hard stuff. But like the crucible, we really believe that God is with us in it, and we can handle it. We will come through it. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to thank my wonderful colleagues who we've all come to love each other so much. We were saying that on Fridays, we're getting ready for this. We love you guys, love you guys. And that's where the grace is. That's really, that's where you find the healing. So I'm going to turn it over to Maureen now. I'm going to thank everybody again for being with us. And I hope we're able to turn this into a recording. We'll have to see. Anyway, go ahead, Maureen.
Greater God, source of all being, we place ourselves in your holy presence. We ask you to open our hearts and minds to each other and to what you are saying to each of us through this presentation today. Help us to embrace and further the Synodal process by speaking and truly listening with honesty and humility and great love. May it bring hope and healing to our wounded world and church. We continue to pray for the victims and survivors of sexual abuse. May all who have been abused in any way by your church ministers be respected and receive real justice and authentic reparation. May we be beacons of Christ's healing light and compassion to them, to their families, and to all the world. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you very much for everybody being here, and pray for our technology.
God bless everybody. Thank you for being here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.